Hello, Adam Booth here, Upshift Online. Sitting before me is the Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro. That's a mouthful, but you'll learn to love it. It's an all-new model. Well, it's an updated model of the 900. So we spent a couple days riding this thing. We're up in here in the mountains of Idaho. We rode a couple hours on the asphalt, broke off onto some gravel roads, which then turned into two-track, which then turned into single-track, which then turned into exploring a little bit. Overall, this bike is awesome, just a general cool adventure bike. Inline 3-cylinder motor, Showa suspension now, which is a huge upgrade. Brembo brakes, front and rear. I mean, overall, this thing on the freeway after a couple hours, it just carves the canyons. It's like vibration free. I played around with all the settings on the road. Cruise control, pretty awesome because you can set it and you can go up and down on your speed, relax, zero vibration. It was about 45 degrees this morning. Grip heaters were amazing, and the butt heater seat thingy in the seat was giving me warm vibrations up through the backside. So that was great on the street. I'm not much of a street guy, but in general, this thing was very comfortable on the street. I even lugged it in 6th gear, 5th gear, 4th gear in really slow conditions, and the motor doesn't chug, it just rolls on like ultra smooth. We got on the dirt, traction control kicked in, it sputtered. These big adventure bikes, traction control always just wants to minimize any wheel spin, so eventually sometimes you just come to a grinding halt. So I stopped, I went through all the settings, went through the menu. I bounced between off-road and off-road pro setting on this. I opted to go with just the off-road setting, which leaves the ABS brakes on the front, but lets you skid the rear wheel. With any big adventure bike, that's kind of the only way to turn them on the dirt. You kind of back in the rear and then roll out on the clutch. I cannot personally out-brake ABS on the front. If you can, you are amazing, congratulations, but there's no reason to turn off ABS on the front wheel, especially in a panic situation. If you just stab the brakes, you're not going down. So my best setting overall today was just the off-road setting. I turned the traction control completely off, and this does take a little bit more throttle control. This thing will light the rear tire up and get roaring in a hurry. It's a lot of power, but luckily it rolls on smooth. It's not explosive, but if you're not careful with the right hand, especially on slippery surfaces, you will just start fishtailing. And speaking of that, this thing will drift and slide pretty controllably, especially if the surface is consistent and you can kind of get a feel for what that is, and you can just start laying down huge slide marks from corner to corner. It also works really well under braking. The Showa suspension, I never had the forked bottom, even downhill through rocky terrain on the brakes. So out on the roads, it's consistent and the front end doesn't dive when you start getting on the brakes hard into a corner. So you can come out of a slide and then set up for the next corner and really dive on the front brake and get the back end light and kind of get it to float out, but it doesn't get that dive and then upset the balance of the bike where you're starting to feel unbalanced. On the note of the suspension, crazy impressed with the action of the front fork. It moves a lot. You go down a rocky trail and the front fork is just super active, but it's keeping the tire on the ground and the bike isn't moving and you're not feeling it through the handlebars. Plus it doesn't deflect. You can kind of just let the weight of the bike run you down a hill or run you down a trail, even if it's rocky and cobbly. And you'll probably see in the video footage, it's pretty wild how fast the fork's moving up and down. But again, I never clanked the stops. I never felt it wallow, and I never felt the bike unbalanced because of that fast action of the fork. For an adventure bike this big and this stable and this good on-road, I was very impressed off-road. It always takes a couple hours to get used to a big heavy bike, but after a while I was able to start brake sliding it around to turn around on a trail and then get back on the gas and feel like I wasn't going to drop it or feel like it wasn't going to high side or do anything funny. Again, there's some features on here. There's rain mode, road mode, that kind of stuff. It doesn't really concern me. If it's raining on the road, I'm probably getting passed by a big rig. I don't do stuff fast on asphalt, whether it's dry or wet. I like off-road, I like two-track. And so this bike can get me there and I could go with my friends and I could still feel pretty confident even if it runs down to a two-track or a fairly mellow single track. We're not talking side hilling or trying to get over logs or huge, forest routes. But in general, if you have a little bit of a skill on an adventure bike off-road, this thing will get you farther than you think. And a lot of that is based on the balance and thankfully the big suspension that holds this bike up. So overall, the size of the bike, I'm about 5'8", sometimes 5'9", depending if I stand up straight. But when I sit on this bike, my arms are almost to where I probably would start to feel a little outstretched if I was any shorter. My arms are pretty much straight out, and it's fairly comfortable after a while. But when I stand up is when the bike feels really nice. Standing on this, I'm super comfortable. I don't feel like the bars are in my lap, but I also don't feel like I'm reaching out for them. So right about 5'8", 5'9", any smaller and you're probably gonna feel like the bars are too far away from you. So the Rally Pro, it comes with a lot of added features, a lot more protection for the guys who really want to take this off-road. If you're going to go off-road and you're going to go with your friends, you're probably going to drop it once in a while. It just happens. You get off balance, you get some sand, whatever, you fall. So it has crash bars. It has a very good skid plate to protect the undercarriage. This motor and this setup's a little more susceptible to smashing into something if you're not careful, but this skid plate helps mitigate any issues with that. Also, it has hand guards, which are nice. You don't have to add those on. And it has some auxiliary lights on the front that are nice and bright as well. It's kind of neat to be behind this bike because the turn signals light up red when you hit the brakes, but then they turn into turn signals when you need a turn signal. So anybody behind you sees a little more red when the brake lights come on. So I kind of really fell in love with this inline 3-cylinder motor. It's only a 900cc motor, but it falls really nicely in between the category of a little 700 and a massive 1290. I've ridden all the bikes, and there's certain aspects where a big 1290 is awesome, especially if you're a tall, bigger guy, or you just like mobs of power. This motor has a lot of power as is, and kind of bridges that gap between a 700 and a big 1200. It's not a GS, but it's not the new Yamaha 700. It kind of falls in between there, but again, the suspension, the motor, there's no vibration, it rides smooth. It has some cool electronics, more so than other bikes, and it comes with the cruise control, the grip heaters, the seat heater, windshield that can adjust up and down, and is ultra smooth on the road. And then the suspension holds up off-road. So the Rally Pro has a pretty easy to read heads-up little dashboard display here behind the windshield. There's a lot of options. It can be a bit confusing right at first, but that's like with any car or bike you get on, you have to kind of familiarize yourself with all the buttons and what they do. So there's a few different ride modes. They're easy to choose from. And then there's a home button, which then gives you more categories. But each mode, say it's rain mode, rider mode, sport mode, off-road, off-road pro, you can go within each one of those modes and choose how you want the power. You can choose how you want the traction control. You can also choose how you want the ABS braking, especially in the off-road and the off-road pro. So I went in and kind of customized my own settings to what I liked. And again, I fell in love with off-road power, ABS on the front, no ABS on the rear, and no traction control on the rear. So that was really nice. Another cool thing is a lot of bikes, when you turn them off, you turn them back on, it goes right back to that default setting. Well, when you turn this off, turn it back on, it will go back to the default setting. But if you pay attention to the screen, you can hit just two buttons in unison, or right after each other rather, and it'll bring you right back to the last mode you had set up. So there's no more just going back, recustomizing. It's kind of a fail-safe so that people just don't get on and ride without traction control or without ABS. But it defaults to the on-road setting if you turn it off. And again, you push one button, push another, it goes right back to your last setting, which I appreciated instead of having to fumble through the menu. So we only did a slight modification in the way of a couple things on this bike. We changed out the stock Bridgestone tires and we put on Bridgestone Battle Axe AX41 tires. They're more aggressive, more geared towards off-road riding. I still thought they were great on the street and didn't cause any vibration. So that was cool. And then another thing that we at Upshift love to do to all bikes, Dualsport-Adventure, are double take mirrors. And they are almost bulletproof, they don't vibrate, and they are very easy to adjust. So that's kind of an addition we love to put on everything. So Triumph did a good job, and I appreciate the introduction of the Rally Pro for a guy like me who loves to go a little more off-road than the normal guy. There is a huge audience of people out there who loves more off-road than the normal Tiger 900 offered. So by adding better suspension, crash guards, skid plate, hand guards, that kind of stuff, it really stepped this bike up into like a dirt road kind of cruiser into a real capable off-roader. Well, that's it from me. I'm Adam Booth, Upshift Online. I'm going to go ride this bike some more. I got a few more hours to get back to where we started, some more dirt roads. Make sure you check out Upshift Online and continue watching what we do.